Betty Dannewitz, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
I always go to the LinkedIn page and I just read a little bit there. Truth teller, confidence coach, passion to help people become better humans. Love all about that. I'll tell you the truth and ask the hard questions. That's a difficult thing for some people to do, but the LinkedIn page doesn't tell the full story. So please tell me your story.
Sure. One thing is for sure, I am a truth teller, and I'll start with this. I have spent my career in learning and development, helping people to really sort of build confidence, capability, and find courage to try things before they feel 100% ready. That's kind of my thing, right? So like it says on there, I'm a big believer in helping people become better humans, and that's really what I'm all about. So I started out as a training specialist back in the day. I've been in learning and development, like I said, like 20 plus years. I decided I didn't have to count anymore once I got to 20. But when we get to 30, we'll have a party. But yeah, so a lot of my work is really about sort of the intersection of L&D and emerging technology. So even in my day job, which by day I work for Blanchard, they're a leadership development company. I'm a solution architect with them. And a lot of what I've been doing lately is talking about and building content around AI and leadership. How do we now show up as leaders now that AI is not only part of the whole toolbox, but often a team member? So that type of thing. And then, I also speak at conferences. I'm known as If You Ask Betty across the L&D industry. I have a podcast called the If You Ask Betty podcast, which
Nice.
is about all types of development topics for all kinds of learning professionals, because quite frankly, learning professionals tend to be the last people to be developed because we're busy doing the developing.
Yeah, and
So
you got to really take that on yourself at times
you
too.
do. You absolutely do. So I thought, let me create a space where people can come and learn at their leisure. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm sure there's more, but I mean that's a good part of my story. Yeah.
So is this something that you set out to be a part of, or did you find yourself in that spot that a lot of people find themselves in, where they're really good at one job and then they're told to go train it? Did you choose this, or were you voluntold?
Yeah, that's a great. So yeah, so I was working for a bank. I actually worked
Mhm.
in the brick and mortar branches, which are, fewer and farther between now, but this was, 20 plus years ago. And I was really great at my job. And they said, "Hey, exactly like you said, why don't you go train people?" I was like, "I could do that." And yeah, so I knew nothing about anything except I was willing to talk in front of people and I knew how to do my job as an office manager at the bank. So we started there, and the first time I facilitated a class, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is definitely my jam."
Yeah.
Fast forward a few years later, the first time I facilitated at a conference where like the folks that were in the seats were actually peers of mine. I was like, "This is where I'm supposed to spend time." I've completely fell in love with that. So you'll always find me at least a conference or two every year.
Yeah. I encourage people to go to the conferences, and I always say, when you go to the conference, the breakouts are great, the certifications are great, the value's in the hallway.
Absolutely.
You've got to be talking to people,
That's right.
and I've always said, and this goes back to something that Bob Pike wrote about years ago, and we just talked about on a Throwback Thursday. You've got to build that network before you need it, and those
Mhm.
conferences are a great place to do that.
Yep. Agreed.
So you at ATD, you taught a couple things, but the one that caught my eye was burnout to balance, prioritizing wellness in L&D.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So one thing ATD does really well is they have these sessions that are called community conversations. And so they'll bring somebody like me in who knows something about a topic like burnout or prioritizing wellness. And they'll say, here's an hour. We're going to open the room to 100 plus people, get them to talk to each other.
Mhm.
And I gotta be honest, like, one of my favorite things to do is to get people to talk to each other, which is why introverts avoid me in the hallway. No, I'm just kidding. Kind of kidding. But yeah, so what I did in this session is I sort of opened it up by talking about, here's who I am, here's what I do. Oh, and by the way, I'm currently playing footsie with Burnout myself. And so I'm here to encourage you to talk to each other so that we can find what are some of the things that we're doing to copy and steal from everybody with the things that they're doing to avoid this whole burnout thing. Because right now, especially right now in our industry, it feels like that is always just the next step is we're working so hard to keep up that the next step is we're going to either just fall off the cliff and burn out or we're going to have to go find another job at Target. But there's
So
nothing
there's
wrong
a
with working at Target, but
no.
I mean, like, yeah, ringing people up at Target.
What I There's two things that I want to hit on here that I really like about this. One is the genuine respect for the participant's experience.
Mhm.
Because it would be easy to look at this and say, okay, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to tell them everything that I already know about burnout. And they probably I what I tell a lot of staff that I work with is, look, probably 70% of what you're gonna say in there, people in the room already know, but it's
Yep.
5% with this person and 10% with this person. And your goal is to get that 70% out of everybody and then use 30% to fill in the gaps. So I love the way that you come in and say, you are all dealing with this and you
Mhm.
all have these solutions. Let's talk about that. And I also want to point out something that Sadiq Love said. I love Sadiq, and he said this in his master facilitator program. He said the best facilitators will give up control for
Mhm.
contribution, and that's
100%. Every
exactly
time.
what you did there. So,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that you heard talking about, and some of the solutions? Like maybe just what were some of the problems, and
Sure.
what were some of the solutions?
Sure. So I went through a series of questions. I gave them sort of 3 rounds. Actually, let me back up. First, I had them, like, introduce themselves and talk about something somewhat benign so that they've already warmed up the idea that we're gonna be talking at our table.
Mhm.
And then I had them go through 3 rounds of questions. One was about sort of them, one was about their team, and one was about their organization. Like, how do we recognize burnout in ourselves? What do we do about it when we see it in our teams? And what can we do to change it in our organizations? That's sort of like the general aspects. And what I did when I had them answer some of these questions was I walked around and listened. And I had about, I would say, probably 80 people in the room. So there were at least 10 or 12 tables that I was sort of fishing my way through. And I took my little notebook with me and I just wrote down some sound bites, just completely out of context. And because I wanted people at table A to know what people at table F were saying without us spending the whole day debriefing everyone's conversation. And so there was one particular conversation or one particular prompt where I said, "Hey, I want you guys to talk about what it is that is causing this burnout and how are you feeling about it? What are the things that you feel like you either need to stop doing or we need to just stop pretending like they're causing problems?" Because I thought it might be I thought we might have some similar thoughts. And so as I was walking around, I wrote down and then I had them do this. I said, "Okay, now what I want you to do is I'm going to read off some of these words that I heard. And if you can resonate, if that resonates with you or you can connect to that, I want you to knock on your table." And they said, "Okay." I said, "Let's go ahead and practice. Go ahead and knock on your table." And so they knocked and I said, "No, no, no, just knock once. Ha ha ha." Okay. So we've broken the ice on the knocking on the table. Right. And so I started to read things out. And some of the things I read were things like, um, if you'll pay for AI, why won't you pay for another person?
Mm.
And so you'd hear knock, right? Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that I heard. Something like, and then we all had to stay till 9 o'clock that night, hear a knock. And then, or I might have heard something like, and it didn't matter how much I worked or how late I stayed, I still had more work to do. And the knocks would get louder sometimes. And like to the point where sometimes I was like, whoa, like, we're going to hit the Richter scale with that one. And what I found is that it was a way for them to hear from each other, all of them, and recognize that they are not alone. And I think that's one of the biggest things that can help us with this whole idea of feeling burnout or prioritizing wellness is recognizing that, as L&D professionals, we spend so much time thinking about how people learn, how much they absorb, what support they need, how we can help them change their behavior, that we ignore all of that when it comes to ourselves. We just push through. and we overpack our schedules. We always say yes. We always respond to every quick question like it's a 5 alarm fire. Let me just get this done, and then we can't figure out why go home feeling like crispy because we
Yeah.
are completely burnt out. And anyways, I wanted them to feel like they weren't alone, and I feel like that in that session that was definitely something that they took away.
I want to take a step back and talk about what you did at the beginning because what you're talking about in here, this whole session, it's a deeply personal
Hmm.
conversation. I mean, this is not about how to design correctly or how to do anything with articulate. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This is an emotional, deeply personal conversation.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the fact that you talked about at the beginning how you did small things to create a sense of safety because that sense of safety in the room, you're in a room full of 80 people, you're not going to stand up and start bearing your deeply personal things.
Yeah.
So one of the things you did to actually be successful is you put them in small groups. You didn't ask them to bear it all in front of the whole group. You said, "Okay, we're
Right.
going to put you in small groups." And I think I think that's key to the success of this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you have to create safety. Like, okay, so I always say that everyone is responsible for psychological safety. So you look around the room, every person that you can see and every person that can see you, every person that is in this room is responsible for psychological safety. As a facilitator, it's up to me to create or design or make opportunities for people to feel safe together. So, yes, I did small groups. They all had anywhere from 2 to maybe 5 people at the table. The good news is when they came in, they either sat with people they knew or with people that they were like kind enough to say, "Is it okay if I sit with you?"
Mhm.
So there was really only one person that I had to say, "By the way, if you're sitting at a table by yourself, this isn't going to work. You're going to have to move. You're going to have to move." And she was a fellow facilitator. And before I finished saying what I was saying, she got up and moved, which is fine. But people have to feel like I can say what I need to say in order to really get the full 100% benefits of the session, especially with something like a community conversation. One of the things I heard someone say that I didn't repeat out loud to everyone else was, and then I just get belligerent sometimes.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, ooh, there was a little internal cringe, but also I'm glad that he had a moment that he could say that out loud to people who are his peers in a place where he felt like if I say this, there's no retribution. No one's gonna come back at me, and it's not gonna show up on my review, but I've actually been able to say, I feel so bad sometimes that I want to push back in a negative way at work." And so, creating that space starts with the facilitator being willing to be vulnerable. So, at the beginning, when I said, "I'm also playing footsie with burnout," like, if I just showed up and said, "I'm a burnout expert," which by the way, I'm not, but if I was like, "And this is A, B, C, D, what you need to do," it's not gonna be very helpful. What they need to hear is that person across from them who has the same or similar job, or maybe their job is even more difficult, there's even more pressure involved. They need to hear that that person feels the same, and then they'll feel like they can share as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that guy was saying and then I get belligerent and I do it intentionally. Like I
Right.
intentionally punch back or then I get belligerent and I feel bad about that because I'm reacting rather than responding. But you're right. It's
And it
it's
yeah.
that type of openness
Mhm.
that you don't get if you have everybody if you try that right out of the gate. So I wanted to say kudos for that.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
fantastic that you were able to get them to do that.
I would even say, even if at the table other people are sharing and the person that's there that doesn't share, they're still getting a lot of benefit just from hearing what other people are doing. Even if they're not willing, even if it's not safe enough for them, because who knows, their boss could be sitting at the table. I've gone to
Mhm.
conferences with my boss many times. And if I were sitting there talking about burnout, I would either have gotten up and moved to another table and been like, "I can't talk about this with you," or I may have held back a little bit because that just, I think, is our natural instinct.
Yeah, it's your
But
self-preservation. That's
absolutely.
your self-interest not to say anything.
That's right.
At
That's
least
right.
in the short term until you burn out and then you're like,
And
"Oh, I
then
should have
and then
should
you
have
have a
done
lot to
more."
say. Exactly. Exactly.
And then you're
Yeah,
belligerent.
that's right.
Oh, man. So some of the things you heard in there, was there anything aside from "then I get belligerent" that
Mhm.
that surprised you? Maybe something you hadn't heard before?
Honestly, not really.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because really one of the the tricky things I think about burnout and L&D is because the work that we do feels meaningful,
Hmm.
right? We're helping people grow, we're supporting leaders, we're solving business problems or trying to, and so because it feels meaningful, we take longer to recognize that it's actually draining us. Just because work is meaningful doesn't mean it doesn't drain you. Just because a project is makes you feel passionate doesn't mean that passion should replace rest, right? So like I think that's part of the thing with in L&D with burnout is that sometimes we just tell ourselves if I just push through this, I have to do this. I have to. I'll tell you that. I hear that a lot. I even hear that on my teams currently at work is I'll be like, you should just take time off. No, I can't. One of my colleagues is going on a vacation. She's like, I'm going to be gone for 10 days. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, you're going to not work. And she's like, I don't know if I can do that. I'm like, where are you going? She says, I'm going to France. I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to go to France and then you're going to leave your laptop at home. No, no, no. I have to take my laptop and I'm like, no, 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 you don't. And I think we feel like because our work matters, we have to push through. But guess what? This is not the emergency room. Have you watched The Pit?
No, I
Have you-
have not.
Okay, so put that one on your list.
Roger that.
By the way, it's not really bingeable because it's pretty heavy. Every episode's pretty heavy, but it's good. But the idea that it's about an emergency room in Philadelphia. Oh no, sorry, Pittsburgh, which is why it's called The Pit. Duh. Same state. Anyways, Pittsburgh. So it's about an emergency room. And there, I would agree, like they do need to push through because the lives are at stake. There are no lives at stake here in L&D. Most of us lives are not at stake. So we have to kind of come away from that thought that constant urgent feeling that just because our work is meaningful, that doesn't mean that we can't rest. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't take the time that we need to recover.
Yeah, and you should just thinking about if I were to have a trip to France, I'm like, what books would I put on my Kindle? I'd be like, oh,
Right.
this is a great opportunity to review the Adult Learning Theory by Michael. No, don't do
Don't
that.
do that.
Don't do that.
Read
Just
something
relax.
smutty with dragons in it. That's what you should read.
You could just put with dragons at the Adult Learning Theory with dragons.
A
That's a whole different
adult
book.
book with dragons. Wait, hold on. Yeah.
So, um, one thing I also wanted to point out for those who are listening that you did, and I think we need more trainers doing. Um, and I keep referencing Bob Pike, but the guy taught me so much. And one of the things he taught me was there are different focuses that people can have when they're in the front of the room. And you
Mhm,
can have I've seen folks who come in with a focus on the curriculum and it's we don't have time for questions right now. I still have 102 more slides to get through and we're running behind.
mhm.
I've seen folks who walk into the room and the focus is on them. And that's where if you were to said, look, I'm a burnout expert and you should all just sit there and listen to the wisdom that I'm about to give you. You're all
Right.
blessed just to be in my presence. But then there's the focus on the participant.
Mhm,
And that's what you came in with. It's not about me. It's about you.
mhm.
I have to make you all feel safe. I have to get you to a place where you can talk. And then I have to pull the wisdom out of you that you all contain so that you can share it with everybody else. So I
Yeah.
think that's important too. Tell me what were some of the solutions that you heard in there to deal with this stress that so many trainers are dealing with?
Sure. So some of the things I heard were, take a break, which I always, I'm like, this is actually a really good tactic. However, you have to actually do it. So we can schedule a break. That's great. Put it in your calendar. But if you just ignore it and push through, it's not. So I think the biggest thing I heard was do the thing that you
Mm,
said you should do. So do the thing. So if you're going to take a break, do the thing. Push away from your desk and go to any other place. Um, maybe you go step outside if you're in a nice climate and it's nice outside. Maybe you just go and sit. If you're working from home, you go and sit in the other room just for a few minutes, not with your phone, not doom scrolling, but just take a break. So make a mental shift and a physical shift. It can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You could go for a walk. You could be quiet. Um, you could close your eyes. I mean, it doesn't have to be big and spectacular and sparkly and memorable. It just needs to be not working right now for a few moments.
Yeah,
That's one of the things. Yeah.
one thing that really want to highlight is do the thing. And you mentioned physical and mental. It would be easy for me sitting here in my office having a struggle to say, okay, I got to take a break, go downstairs, sit with my kids. Physically, I'm on the couch with them. Mentally, I'm up here going, I can't figure this out. I don't know
Yeah.
where I need to get from A to B. You've got to take that. You've got to be deliberate. I
On
mean, you
purpose.
can't just go through the motions.
Yep. Exactly. Another thing that I heard was, stop confusing urgency with importance, right?
Nice.
So,
Tell me
like,
more about that.
not every request is a fire drill. And so, being able to, when things come in, creating some space between stimulus and response, right? That's definitely not the first time you've heard that. And I'm not the one
Mhm.
that said that first. But so a message comes in, you don't have to answer every message immediately. Just by creating a little bit of space, you answer it on your own terms and you take away that urgency and you say, okay, look at it first. Is this important? It is important. Should I answer it pretty quickly? I should. Do I have to answer it right this second? I really don't. I can finish what I'm doing and then take the breath and then take and answer this next thing. So it's separating and stopping confusing urgency with importance. And part of that too is you have to be able to discern between the two. And if you've gotten to the point where everything feels urgent and important, like this is that age, tale as old as time quadrant. You know what I'm talking
Mhm.
about? Like
Yeah,
it,
Eisenhower matrix.
yeah, the Eisenhower matrix, Covey's brought it over.
Yep.
Like we've all used it in some way or another. If everything is landing in urgent and important, there's a real good chance that one, you're either so behind that everything really is urgent and important. That's probably not the case. Or two, you are misdiagnosing. You do not have the discernment to understand what is really important versus not important, urgent versus not urgent. You may need to stop and redesign that in your life. Yeah.
And you might even say that it's like that because that's the only quadrant you ever operate in.
Yep.
That's the only quadrant you're even aware of, and maybe you need to shift from time to time over to quadrant 1 and
Yeah.
say, "What's important but not urgent
But not
that
urgent.
could help me deal with all this mess over
That's
here?"
right. That's right. You got to stop and take the time. I took a class 20 years ago. It was called Focus back then. It was a Franklin Covey class where I first learned about that. And then I think since then it was called something. It changed many times. Focus was the first version with Outlook. So like
Okay.
previous it was with their planners, right?
That's the one I took.
Yeah, with the planner, and then Focus was the one that you could use Outlook, and I learned a lot about time management, but mostly what I learned is that whole if you spend the time in the things that are important but not urgent, you will minimize the times that land in urgent and important, and you will also you'll be able to better recognize, is it urgent or is it important? Because we get to the point where we think everything is, and it just isn't. That's just not the case.
Yeah, and there's another book, it's a Franklin Covey book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Wow.
Fantastic book also, but they talk about the whirlwind in that and how we always have these things we wanna go do, and we make these plans,
Mhm.
but then the whirlwind gets in our way, and the whirlwind is all the stuff that we're supposed to do. It's how we make our living,
Yeah.
but then there's that one thing. Often that one thing is sacrificed to the whirlwind, but
Yep.
that comes in with that 4 quadrant thinking and saying, "No, I have to make time for this."
That's right.
How does a person who's the one person shop, we see this all over, you're the only person in training, everything's falling on you. What's your advice to them when it feels like all the world's falling down and they're just about ready to snap?
Yeah. So the question you're asking me is how do we how do we how to save a life, right?
Yeah.
That song comes to mind, right? Like how do we get them to step back? And my first piece of advice would be you have to take a break and recalibrate. Like I've learned a lot over the last couple of years about this whole idea of somatic practices to regulate your nervous system. Now, I'm not gonna go on a tangent about it because I know just enough to know I know nothing about it, except that if I am feeling that that hitch right here where you
Mhm.
feel like you're anxious, you're not sure why, you keep catching yourself holding your breath, your shoulders are always up in your ears, you're like, "Oh, I just can't relax." That is an indicator that your nervous system is out of whack. And the only way to get that back in whack, for lack of a better term, to get that regulated is for you to actually regulate it. No one can walk in and say something or do something that's going to fix that for you. So you have to find, what is it that I need to do for me? Do I need to take that break? Do I need to take a walk? Do I need to just take a day off? Do I need a massage? Do I need to focus on breathing? There are some great apps, free apps. There's one that's called Tappy. I don't know if you've ever used Tappy. If you like fidget spinners and stuff, it has like digital fidget stuff, but it also has a section where it will walk you through like a breathing exercise. And this might sound woo woo, but the first time you stop, close your eyes, breathe for 30 seconds or 90 seconds, whatever it is, and then are able to re engage and you feel that hitch go away, you'll be a believer instantly. And so it's finding that, first of all, you have to get your sort of yourself, your body back in order before you can deal with any of this other stuff. Because as long as your nervous system stays dysregulated, that you won't be able to regulate anything else in your life. So you've got to get you under control. And then after that, I mean, I'm going to use the B word. You have to work on boundaries. And I would be the first person to say that I'm not a fan of boundaries. That's a totally different podcast, but you have to have boundaries in your workday. I mean, if you think about it, you have to know, like, what is my timing? What am I going to work today? When am I going to stop working? Some of us stop working when we feel like the work is done enough, and that's 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
It's we
Yeah.
have to set some boundaries, and then we have to tell others what our boundaries are so that we can stay within them. Because just setting them yourself, if you don't tell somebody else, like if you're not like, hey, every Friday at 4 o'clock, whatever's done is done and I'm out, right? If you don't share that with someone, they're still going to book meetings at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. It's going to keep happening.
And speaking of sharing with someone, just
Yeah,
because you're the one person shop at Acme fidget spinners or whatever, that doesn't mean you're the one man shop in the industry.
that's right.
And so there are other people. I I put myself out
Absolutely.
there. You wanna message me on LinkedIn and bounce something off of me. If I have time, I'll be more than happy to help you, or I'll make time. But you're not alone out there either. So there are times, um, I tell my kids sometimes, look, God gives us burdens, but He also gives us shoulders, and He also gives us people to help.
Hmm.
So look for those helpers too, and you can
Yeah,
reach out and find them. That's one of the reasons why I say the hallway is the most important part, because
absolutely.
you'll be struggling with something and you'll be like, "I met Betty, I wonder if she can help me with this."
I
Ye
call them my board of directors. So I have
Nice.
sort of this group of people, and it ebbs and flows as to who's on my board of directors, but they're people that I know will tell me the truth in love when I ask for it. And so those are the people that I go to, and honestly, not most of them do not work with me on a regular basis. They're people I know from the industry. They're women I used to run with a decade ago. They're people that I know will tell me the truth in love when I need it. And so having those people that, like you said, that you can reach out to, even if you're like reaching out and you're like, "Hey, I have 5 minutes. I just wanted to say I feel very dysregulated today, and I just wanted to call you and say why is life like this? What the hex?"
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
person says, "I know, right?" And that in and of itself can help you regulate.
there's a video out there with Simon Sinek, excuse me,
Mhm.
Simon Sinek talking about a friend of theirs that was going through a really, really hard time, and they never called Simon. And Simon said, "Why didn't you call me?" And it only took he's talking about this study that says it only takes 8 minutes
8
to
minutes.
8 minutes. And he said, "So now we don't say, 'Hey, Betty, how you doing?' It's, 'Hey, Betty, you got 8
You got
minutes.'"
8
And that's
minutes.
a signal. They need me. And so find somebody willing to give you 8 minutes, because you
Agreed.
never know when they're gonna need it too. So,
Absolutely.
uh, that's the the time, Betty. I mean, we could probably talk about this another hour or two, but what I want to know is, and what I want to give you the opportunity, if there's someone out there who's hearing this that says, I would really like to have Betty come and work with our team on this, how
Yeah.
can they get a hold of you?
Oh, sure. You can find me at If You Ask Betty. So all one word, all lowercase. Just about anywhere you can put in at If You Ask Betty. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, even if you type in If You Ask Betty, you'll find me. You can find me at ifyouaskbetty.com, ifyouaskbetty at gmail.com. I tried to make it easy.
That is beautiful branding. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for the way that you're designing and facilitating trainings. It's a pleasure to see, someone do well. So thank you for that.
Thanks so
Thank you
much
for
having
being
me.
here.
Thank you.